I am Jordan, and I just turned 35 last month. 2 years ago, I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table in our sprawling ranch house on the outskirts of Dallas, the kind with vaulted ceilings and a view of the manicured lawn that screamed old money. My heart sank as I watched them slide an envelope across to my brother Austin, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. $250,000, Dad announced, his voice booming with pride. To get you and Brooke started right in that fancy suburb, your dream home, son. Austin beamed, hugging them both, while I forced a smile, my stomach twisting into knots. That night, as I lingered in the hallway pretending to grab a glass of water, I overheard Dad's low rumble to Mom. At least one of our kids isn't throwing their life away on some do-gooder gig that barely pays the bills. The words hit like a gut punch, echoing all the years of being the afterthought, the one who didn't measure up. I slipped out the back door without a word, my hands shaking as I blocked their numbers on my phone, deleted every trace. No more calls, no more holidays, just silence. 2 years of building my life from the ground up until last week when Austin, cruising back from a meeting in his shiny SUV, spotted the sign for my new Elder Guard Community Health Center and hit the brakes hard. He jumped out, face pale, and immediately dialed Dad, yelling into the phone. "You have to see this. Jordan's built something huge here. She's not the failure you thought." And before we get back to the story, would you be kind enough to give this video a like? You know, every single like means a lot to me. It's the kind of encouragement that keeps me creating and bringing you even better stories tomorrow. Growing up in Plano, Texas, where every neighborhood looked like it was straight out of a real estate catalog, perfect lawns, luxury cars parked in driveways, and folks waving like they were in a Hallmark movie, our family fit right in on the surface. But inside, it was all about the chase, status, appearances, and stacking cash like it was the only scorecard that mattered. Dad, Robert Hayes, was a big shot in oil and gas trading, grinding through endless weeks at the office, coming home with stories of killer deals and bonuses that paid for our pool parties and vacations to Aspen. Mom, Linda, played the part of the ultimate Southern hostess, organizing fundraisers at the country club and making sure our Christmas cards were the envy of the block. From as far back as I can remember, the favoritism stung in little ways that added up, like paper cuts turning into scars. Austin, 3 years older, was the golden boy, the one who'd inherit the throne, follow Dad's path, keep the Hayes name synonymous with success. I loved him, sure, but it hurt watching how they lit up for him and dimmed for me. Deep down, a voice whispered that maybe if I tried harder to fit their mold, I'd earn that same glow. But another part of me rebelled, clinging to the pull toward helping folks who needed it most, even if it meant bucking the family script. As a kid, I'd tag along to community events, handing out water at charity runs, or helping at the local clinic, feeling that rush of making a difference. But every time I shared my excitement, Dad would wave it off. "That's nice, Jordan, but Austin's got the real drive. He's already talking stocks at 10. The conflict gnawed at me, loyalty to the family that raised me versus the fire in my gut telling me my path was worth fighting for. It built this quiet war inside, where love tangled with resentment, making every family dinner feel like walking a tightrope. Those early years set the tone, planting seeds of doubt that I'd spend decades uprooting. I can still picture summer barbecues where Austin's latest business idea got cheers, while my stories of bandaging a neighbor's sprained ankle drew polite nods at best. It wasn't just the big stuff. It was the everyday dismissals that chipped away at my confidence, leaving me wondering if I was chasing fool's gold or something real. But even then, I held on, sensing that breaking free might cost me everything, or give me back myself. How did I turn that pain into a center that's changing lives across Texas, all while my family wrote me off? The Plano sun beat down on our cul-de-sac, where every house looked like it was competing for a magazine spread. Manicured hedges, gleaming SUVs, and porch flags waving like they were auditioning for a 4th of July parade. To the neighbors, the Hayes family was picture perfect. Dad in his pressed suits, Mom with her pearl earrings and church committee smile, Austin and me trailing behind like bookends to their success story. But behind the front door, it was a different script. Austin, 3 years older, was the star of the show, groomed to take over the world, or at least Dad's corner of the oil and gas empire. Me? I was the kid who'd rather patch up a scraped knee than play the stock market game, and that didn't sit right with the family playbook. The favoritism wasn't loud, but it was constant, like a low hum you only notice when it stops. It stung in ways I didn't have words for back then, piling up in my chest like loose change, heavy and unspent. I must have been 7 when I first felt the gap. Austin came home from a junior business camp Dad had signed him up for, clutching a certificate for future CEO. The kitchen erupted, Mom clapping like he'd won an Oscar, Dad slapping his back, promising a steak dinner at Perry's to celebrate. I'd spent that same week helping at a community health fair, handing out Band-Aids and juice boxes to kids whose parents couldn't afford a doctor. I was buzzing, telling Mom how I'd calmed a crying toddler while a nurse checked his fever. "That's sweet, Jordan," she said, barely looking up from her casserole dish. "But let's not track dirt in here. Go wash your hands." Dad glanced over, smirking. "Austin's learning real skills, kiddo. Helping's nice, but it's not a career." My face burned, and I slunk to my room, staring at the ceiling, wondering why my kind of good wasn't good enough. It wasn't just one-off moments. It was a pattern that tightened like a noose. In 5th grade, Austin aced a math competition, and Dad whisked him to a Dallas Cowboys game, box seats with nachos and all. I brought home straight A's that same week, plus a ribbon for a science project on community gardens. Mom patted my head. "Good job, honey, but grades are just the baseline." No game, no fanfare, just a quick nod before they planned Austin's next big thing. By middle school, the divide was clear as day. Austin got a summer internship shadowing Dad's colleagues, learning to read stock tickers while I was still begging to tag along to the local clinic where I'd organized supply closets for nurses. "You're too young for that," Dad said, waving me off. "It's not like you're saving lives yet." But I felt alive there, surrounded by antiseptic smells and grateful smiles, even if it was just stacking gauze pads. Birthdays drove the knife deeper. Austin's 16th rolled around, and the backyard transformed into a spectacle. A shiny new Ford F-150 parked out front with a red bow bigger than my bike. Neighbors clapped, Mom snapped photos, and Dad toasted to the man of the house. My 16th? A used Honda Civic, practical and plain, handed over with a shrug. "It'll get you to school," Dad said. No need for flash when you're just getting by. Austin hugged me, whispering, "It's a solid ride." But I saw the pity in his eyes. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing a grin, but inside I was screaming, why is his dream a parade and mine a footnote? Grandma Ruth was my lifeline. Mom's mom, she lived in a modest bungalow across town, a far cry from our gated community. Her place smelled of lavender and old books, with a porch swing that creaked like it was telling stories. She'd grown up on a West Texas ranch, nursing sick calves and helping neighbors through dust storms. "Money's just paper," she'd say, her hands rough but warm as she taught me to wrap a bandage properly. "What lasts is the good you do when no one's watching." Sundays with her were my escape. She'd let me practice first aid on her old dolls, laughing as I fumbled with gauze. "You've got the healer's touch, Jordan," she'd say, eyes twinkling. "Don't let anyone tell you it's less than gold." One afternoon when I was 12, I confessed how Dad's words made me feel small. She pulled me close, her voice firm. "Your heart's your compass. Their map ain't the only one." She slipped me a worn copy of a book about Clara Barton, the nurse who founded the Red Cross. I hid it under my bed, reading it by flashlight, feeling like maybe I wasn't alone in wanting to fix what hurt. The clinic became my second home by high school. I'd volunteer after school, sorting medical supplies or shadowing nurses during free checkup days. One summer, I helped organize a blood pressure screening for seniors, running around with clipboards, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. The head nurse, Ms. Carla, caught me grinning as an old man thanked me for explaining his meds. "You're a natural, kid," she said. "This work's not glamorous, but it's real." I came home buzzing, telling Mom about the 50 people we'd helped. She was setting the table, barely listening. "That's nice, Jordan, but don't get too caught up. Austin's pitching a business plan at his camp tomorrow, real high stakes." My smile faded, and I excused myself, the familiar ache settling in. Grandma Ruth called that night, sensing my quiet. "Keep at it," she urged. "You're planting seeds they can't see yet." The disparities piled up, each one a brick in a wall between me and my family. Austin's path was paved with gold stars and open doors. Mine was a dirt trail I had to hack through alone. But every time I doubted myself, Grandma's voice echoed, steady as a heartbeat, daring me to keep going. How far would that fire carry me when the one person who saw it started to fade? Grandma Ruth's porch swing creaked under us as we sipped sweet tea, the Texas heat softened by the shade of her old oak tree. Her bungalow, tucked away from Plano's polished sprawl, was my sanctuary, a place where the world didn't measure you by your bank account. At 15, I'd bike over after school, dodging Mom's questions about why I wasn't at cheer practice or some proper extracurricular. Ruth's hands, weathered from years of ranch life, would guide mine as we practiced wrapping bandages on her kitchen table. "Caring's not just a job, Jordan," she'd say, her voice steady like a hymn. "It's how you leave a mark that lasts." She'd share stories of delivering babies in dust storms or stitching up a neighbor's hand after a fence mishap, her eyes lighting up with a fire I wanted to catch. "Success ain't about what you pocket," she told me one evening, pointing to her heart. "It's about who you pull through the hard times." Those words stuck. A lifeline against the constant drumbeat at home that Austin's path, business, deals, dollar signs, was the only one worth walking. By junior year, I poured that fire into a high school project that felt like my first real shot to prove something. I'd been volunteering at the community clinic, soaking up every moment with the nurses, learning how a kind word could calm a nervous patient. For my senior health class, I pitched a peer wellness program, free checkups for kids at school who couldn't afford doctors. I spent weeks planning, coordinating with local nurses, setting up stations in the gym, even designing flyers with cheesy clip art. The day of the event, I was a nervous wreck, clipboard shaking as I directed volunteers. We screened 80 kids, caught a few ear infections, sent one to a dentist for a cavity. A girl my age hugged me after, tears in her eyes, saying her mom couldn't have afforded the visit otherwise. I floated home, clutching a certificate from the regional health board that called me a community champion. At dinner, I slid it across the table, words tumbling out about the lives we'd touched. Mom glanced at it, then passed the mashed potatoes. "That's sweet, Jordan, but don't let it distract you from college apps." Dad barely looked up from his phone. "Austin's presenting at a young entrepreneurs conference next week. Big fish there." My heart sank, the certificate suddenly feeling like just a piece of paper. Ruth called that night, her voice crackling through the line. "You're changing lives, girl. Don't let their blind spots dim your shine." That summer, Ruth's heart started giving out. She'd been slowing down, her breath shorter, but she waved off my worry with a laugh. "Just old gears grinding," she'd say. By August, she was in the hospital, tubes snaking from her arms, monitors beeping like a countdown. I spent every free hour by her bed, reading her medical chart, quizzing nurses about her meds, holding her hand when she drifted off. One night, her eyes fluttered open, clear despite the pain. "Jordan," she whispered, gripping my fingers, "chase what sets your soul on fire. Don't let their money talk drown it out." I nodded, tears burning, promising her I'd keep going. She squeezed my hand, a faint smile breaking through. "You're my legacy, kid." 2 weeks before college orientation, she was gone. The hospital room felt too quiet, her chair empty except for the worn Clara Barton book she'd given me, now dog-eared and tear-stained. Her funeral was a blur of black dresses and casseroles at her bungalow. I stood by her porch swing, clutching that book, while relatives murmured condolences. Dad pulled me aside, his tie loosened, bourbon on his breath. "She was proud of you, Jordan, but don't get stuck in this helper phase. Nursing's fine for some, but you're a haze. You could aim higher." My jaw tightened, the grief twisting into something sharp. "Higher than saving lives?" I shot back, voice low but shaking. He sighed, walking away to shake hands with an uncle, leaving me alone with my anger. That night, in my room, I traced the words in Ruth's book, her voice echoing, "Your heart's your compass." But without her, the path felt lonelier, like I was shouting into a void. Could I keep that promise when the only one who believed in me was gone? The night after Grandma Ruth's funeral, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, her Clara Barton book open in my lap, pages worn from my constant rereading. Her words, "Your heart's your compass," felt like a lifeline, but Dad's jab at the funeral, calling my passion a phase, burned fresh. I was 18, staring down college applications, and the weight of her absence made the world feel unsteady, like a floor that might give way. But her promise wasn't just words. It was a fire I'd carry to Texas A&M's nursing program, even if I had to claw my way there alone. Austin's acceptance to UT Austin's business school turned our house into a circus. Mom threw a backyard bash, complete with brisket, string lights, and neighbors toasting his bright future. My acceptance letter arrived quietly, just a nod from Dad over breakfast. "Nursing's solid, Jordan. Congrats." No party, no fanfare. The real kicker came when tuition talk started. Austin got the full ride. Tuition, a slick off-campus condo, even a credit card for networking expenses. Me? They covered dorm fees and books, nothing more. "You're scrappy," Dad said, flipping through his Wall Street journal. "Work'll toughen you up." So I did. I landed a part-time gig at the campus health clinic, 20 hours a week, scrubbing exam rooms and checking in patients between classes. My days blurred into a grind. 8 a.m. lectures, shifts until 10 p.m., then studying under the dim light of my dorm's desk lamp. Coffee became my lifeline, and sleep was a luxury. One night, I spilled an entire thermos on my anatomy notes, cursing as I mopped up the mess, wondering if Austin ever had to choose between groceries and textbooks. The clinic wasn't glamorous: fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, and the constant beep of monitors, but it felt like home. I'd chat with elderly patients, catching their stories while taking their vitals, feeling that same rush I got at the high school health fair. My sophomore year, I took a geriatrics course with Professor Elena Ramirez, a no-nonsense woman with a sharp mind and a knack for spotting potential. She noticed me lingering after class, peppering her with questions about elder care programs. "You've got a head for systems, Jordan," she said one day, handing me a stack of research on aging-in-place models. "Why not build something practical?" That sparked my group project, a pilot for home health visits to keep seniors out of hospitals. We tested it in a nearby low-income neighborhood, coordinating nurses to check blood pressure and meds. Our data showed a 25% drop in ER visits for our group. I was electric, presenting our findings to the class, my voice steady despite sweaty palms. Professor Ramirez pulled me aside after, "This could scale, you know. Keep pushing." By junior year, our pilot caught the eye of a local health foundation. They awarded us a $10,000 grant to expand, enough to fund a mobile unit for home visits. I poured everything into it. Late nights crunching numbers, weekends training volunteers. The first time we rolled out the van, decked out with the cheesy, Healthy Seniors, Happy Homes logo, I stood in the parking lot, watching a nurse help an elderly woman with her walker, and felt like I was honoring Ruth. I couldn't wait to tell my family. At Thanksgiving, I drove home to Plano, the grant letter folded in my pocket like a trophy. Over turkey, I laid it out. We're cutting hospital visits, saving lives, and it's funded. Mom smiled thinly, passing the gravy. "That's lovely, Jordan, but did you hear? Austin's interning at Goldman Sachs next summer." Dad nodded at him. "That's the big leagues, son." My chest tightened, the letter untouched on the table. I tried again, explaining how the grant could grow into a citywide program. Dad cut in. "Sounds like a lot of work for pocket change. Why not pivot to hospital admin? Better money." I bit my tongue, staring at my plate, the old ache flaring. Austin caught my eye, offering a small nod, but it wasn't enough to dull the sting. The drive back to campus was quiet, just me and the hum of the highway. I kept replaying Dad's words, each one a jab at the path I'd chosen. Professor Ramirez's voice cut through the noise in my head. Keep pushing. But pushing meant balancing shifts, classes, and a program that felt like my heart's work, all while my family barely noticed. Could I keep carrying Ruth's fire when every step felt like running against the wind? The highway stretched dark and endless as I drove back to campus after that Thanksgiving. The $10,000 grant letter crumpled in my passenger seat, untouched by my family's praise. Dad's words, pivot to hospital admin, better money, looped in my head, clashing with Professor Ramirez's encouragement to keep pushing. I gripped the wheel, Ruth's voice faint but stubborn in my memory. Your heart's your compass. It was 2012 and I was 21, graduating soon into a world that felt split between what I loved and what my family valued. I chose my path, but the wind I'd been running against was picking up speed. After graduation, I landed a staff nurse job at a public hospital in San Antonio, a gritty, underfunded place where the linoleum was scuffed and the coffee machine was always broken. The pay was barely enough to cover my one-bedroom apartment, a boxy unit with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but the work lit me up. Every shift was a whirlwind, checking vitals, calming anxious patients, catching a diabetic's low blood sugar before it turned critical. I'd come home bone-tired, sneakers still smelling of antiseptic, but alive in a way I never felt at family dinners. My first year, I worked nights, grabbing cat naps in the break room between codes. One evening, I sat with an elderly woman, Mrs. Alvarez, who clutched my hand as I explained her heart meds. "You're an angel," she whispered, her eyes bright with gratitude. That moment, I felt Ruth's hand on my shoulder, her pride bridging the gap of her absence. By 2014, at 23, I'd climbed to charge nurse, overseeing a small team in the elder care unit. The promotion meant more responsibility, scheduling shifts, training new hires, but also a chance to build something. I pitched a wellness check program for seniors, inspired by my college pilot, free screenings to catch issues early, keeping folks out of the ER. My supervisor, a gruff but fair doctor named Patel, gave me the green light. I spent months designing it. Mobile clinics, blood pressure cuffs, med reviews, poring over data during lunch breaks. We launched in a low-income neighborhood, and within 6 months, ER visits for our patients dropped 40%. I was floored, texting friends late at night. "We're saving lives and money." A local health journal picked up the story, and I got invited to speak at a small conference in Austin. Standing at the podium, my voice steady despite the butterflies, I shared our numbers, watching nods ripple through the crowd. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just chasing Ruth's dream, I was living it. But family visits were a cold splash of reality. I'd drive up to Plano for holidays, hoping to share my wins, but the spotlight stayed on Austin. He'd graduated and snagged a finance job in Houston, pulling 6 figures straight out of the gate. Mom would gush over his corner office, his tailored suits, while Dad bragged about his latest deal to anyone who'd listen. At Christmas 2014, I brought a printout of our program's stats, my hands sweaty as I passed it around the table. "We're cutting hospital costs by thousands," I said, voice bright with hope. Mom skimmed it, then set it aside to refill Austin's wine. "That's nice, dear. Austin, tell Jordan about your bonus. 6 figures this year." Dad leaned in. That's how you build a future, son. I forced a smile, my throat tight, but inside I was screaming, "Don't you see what I'm doing?" Later, alone in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling, Ruth's book on the nightstand, wrestling with the ache of being invisible in my own family. The worst came when a recruiter called, offering a corporate nursing job, hospital administration, double my salary, cushy office in Dallas. It was tempting, like a lifeline to the stability Dad always preached. I sat in my apartment, application half filled on my laptop, picturing a life with no leaky faucets, no ramen dinners. Dad's voice echoed, "Better money." But then I thought of Mrs. Alvarez, her hand in mine, and the seniors who'd hugged me after checkups. I closed the laptop, heart pounding, choosing the work that made me feel whole. Still, the doubt lingered, a shadow whispering, "Are you enough without their approval?" Every family call ended the same. Questions about my little program, suggestions to aim higher. Austin tried to bridge the gap, texting me about his work, but asking about mine too, yet even his kindness couldn't erase the sting of being the odd one out. I poured myself into the hospital, but as my program grew, so did the question. How long could I keep proving myself to a family that didn't care to see? As the months blurred into 2015, that nagging question, how long could I keep proving myself, hung over me like a storm cloud, especially when Austin's texts turned to wedding talk. He was engaged to Brooke, a sharp marketing exec from a family as polished as ours, and the invites came with Mom's excited calls about the party. I drove up to Plano for the engagement bash, telling myself it was for Austin, even as my gut twisted. The house was decked out like a Southern living spread, fairy lights strung across the backyard, a caterer dishing out shrimp and grits, and a playlist of country hits humming in the background. Guests milled around, Dad's golf buddies in khakis, Mom's church friends in sundresses, laughing and clinking glasses. I arrived early, helping Mom set out the silverware, forcing small talk to mask the exhaustion from my latest hospital shift. Austin pulled me into a hug, his cologne sharp and familiar. "Glad you made it, sis. Brooke's thrilled. You're family now." Brooke smiled warmly, her diamond ring catching the light as she chatted about their honeymoon plans. I nodded along, genuinely happy for them, but the undercurrent of my own sidelined life gnawed at me. Dinner unfolded under the stars, toasts flowing like the wine. Dad stood, glass raised, his voice thick with emotion after a few bourbons. To Austin and Brooke, the perfect match. Son, you've made us proud every step. Right school, right job, right girl. He reached into his pocket, pulling out an envelope with a flourish. And to kick off your life together, $250,000 for that dream house in the suburbs. The table erupted in applause, Austin's eyes widening as he passed the check to Brooke, who gasped in delight. I clapped along, my champagne flute heavy in my hand, the number hitting like a freight train, more than I'd earn in 5 years of 12-hour shifts. The envy wasn't about the money. It was the validation wrapped in it, the public seal of approval I'd never gotten. As guests mingled post-dinner, I slipped inside to the kitchen, needing air from the celebration's glow. Stacking plates by the sink, I heard voices from the adjoining pantry. Mom and Dad, unaware I was there. "Flawless night," Mom said, her voice bubbly. "Austin and Brooke are the talk of the town." Dad chuckled. ice clinking in his glass. "He's nailed it all. We raised him right." A pause, then Dad's tone dropped. "At least one kid's not throwing their life away on feel-good gigs that keep her scraping by." My breath caught, plate frozen mid-air. Mom sighed. "Jordan's stubborn. All that education, and she's still playing nurse in some rundown hospital. Where did we go wrong?" The word failure hung unspoken, but it sliced through me, confirming every doubt I'd buried. I set the plate down quietly and stepped into the doorway, my face hot. They startled, Mom's hand flying to her chest. "Jordan, honey, we didn't see you." Dad straightened, defensive. We were just chatting. "No," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "You were calling my work worthless, again." Mom faltered. "We're worried about your future, that's all. Stability." Dad crossed his arms. "Come on, Jordan. Austin's building an empire. You're, what, handing out pills? It's not the return on our investment." The words escalated, my hurt fueling fire. "Investment? You mean the basics you gave me while Austin got the world? My program's saving lives, preventing crises, cutting costs. But it's not flashy enough for you." Mom tried to smooth. "We just want you secure like Austin. That gift tonight? It's because he's shown responsibility." Dad nodded. "Exactly. Why pour more into someone chasing ideals over real success?" The argument layered on, me defending the impact of my work, them circling back to money and status, voices rising in the cramped pantry. "You're wasting your potential," Dad snapped, his face reddening. "Stubborn like Ruth, putting heart overhead." I recoiled, Ruth's memory a fresh wound. "My potential's in mending what's broken, not stacking cash like it's a scorecard." Austin wandered in then, drawn by the noise, his tie loosened. He froze, eyes darting between us. "What's going on?" I looked to him, pleading silently for backup, but he shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Dad. "Guys, maybe cool it. This is my night." No defense, no step in, just neutrality that felt like a betrayal. The reversal hit hard. He'd always been the buffer, but now, with his future tied to their approval, he stayed silent. Mom reached for my arm. "Jordan, we love you. We just see bigger things for you." Dad doubled down. "Face it, you're failing at the basics. Why invest in that?" The word failing landed like a slap, crystallizing years of dismissal. I pulled away, grabbing my purse from the counter. "Thanks for clarifying," I said, voice cracking but firm. "If that's how you see me, I'm done chasing your approval." And I brushed past Austin, who murmured, "Jordan, wait," but didn't follow. Out the door, into the cool night air, I slid into my car, tears blurring the dashboard lights. The drive home was a haze of headlights and heartache, Ruth's compass spinning wildly without her. Back in my apartment, I blocked their numbers with trembling fingers, unfriended them on social media, the finality crashing over me like a wave. Liberation mixed with loss. What now, without even the fight? The silence in my San Antonio apartment was deafening that night in 2015, the glow of my phone screen fading as I blocked the last of my family's numbers. My fingers hovered over Austin's contact, his half-hearted "wait" from the engagement party echoing in my head, but I hit delete anyway. The weight of cutting them off felt like shedding a heavy coat, freeing but cold. I leaned against the counter, the faucet dripping in rhythm with my pulse, Ruth's book on the coffee table catching my eye. Her words, "Your heart's your compass," felt like a dare now, pushing me to prove I could stand alone. At 24, I was done chasing their approval, but the emptiness of that choice settled in my chest, sharp and unfamiliar. The first week without them was a strange dance of relief and ache. No more tense Sunday calls, no more dodging Mom's suggestions to get a real job. I woke up lighter, brewing coffee in my tiny kitchen, the morning sun slicing through cracked blinds. But by evening, the quiet hit hard. I'd scroll through old photos, Thanksgivings, Christmases, Austin and me as kids building forts, and feel the sting of their absence. Dinner was instant noodles, eaten alone at a folding table, the TV on low to drown out the stillness. I threw myself into the hospital to fill the void, my charge nurse badge a small anchor. My elder care program was gaining traction, and I leaned in hard, sketching out plans to expand our free wellness checks. I spent late nights at the hospital, tweaking schedules, calling community centers to book mobile clinic stops. One morning, I caught a senior named Mr. Rivera smiling as I checked his blood pressure. "You're a godsend, mija," he said, his hand shaky but warm. That spark, Ruth's spark, kept me moving even when doubt crept in, whispering, what if they were right? Expanding the program wasn't smooth sailing. Our budget was tight, and my team was stretched thin. 2 nurses and a volunteer juggling dozens of patients. A week in, we hit a snag. A community center canceled our slot, citing a double-booked room. I spent hours on the phone, pleading with their manager, my voice fraying as I pictured seniors missing their checkups. "We're preventing ER visits," I argued, pacing the hospital break room. "This matters." They relented, but the stress piled on. I started mentoring a new nurse, Mia, a 22-year-old fresh out of school with a quick laugh and a chip on her shoulder. She reminded me of myself, eager but underestimated, her own family pushing her toward pharmacy for better pay. Over coffee runs, she'd vent, "My dad says I'm wasting my degree on this." I'd nod, sharing just enough of my own story to keep her going. "Stick with what lights you up," I told her, echoing Ruth. Helping Mia navigate her doubts felt like a small win, a way to keep my promise to Ruth alive, but it also reminded me of the family I'd left behind. A month into the cutoff, I ran into Professor Elena Ramirez at a health conference in Austin. I was presenting our program's latest data, 45% fewer hospital readmissions, and she spotted me by the coffee station, her sharp eyes softening. "Jordan, you're making waves," she said, gripping my shoulder. "This work's got legs." Over lunch, I spilled about the family fallout, the words tumbling out. Dad's failure label, Austin's silence, my blocked contacts. She listened, then leaned in. "You're building something real. Don't let their noise stop you." She mentioned Dr. Marcus Lee, a nonprofit director focused on aging populations who'd be at the conference tomorrow. "He's got funding and vision. Let me introduce you." That night, in a cheap motel room, I stared at the ceiling, Ruth's voice mingling with Elena's. The loneliness still stung, but the idea of scaling my program, making it bigger than my family's doubts, lit a fire. The next morning, Doctor Lee shook my hand, his questions sharp but kind. "Your data's impressive," he said, flipping through my slides. "What's your next step?" I pitched expanding to rural areas, my voice steady despite the nerves. He nodded, handing me his card. "Let's talk seed funding." As I tucked it into my pocket, a mix of hope and fear surged. Could I build something big enough to drown out the silence of my family's absence, or would the weight of going it alone pull me under? Dr. Marcus Lee's business card felt like a lifeline in my pocket as I drove back to San Antonio, the conference's buzz still humming in my veins. It was late 2015, and I was 24, standing at a crossroads. Keep grinding at the hospital or bet everything on a bigger dream. Ruth's words, "Your heart's your compass," clashed with the echo of Dad's voice from that awful night at Austin's engagement party. Why pour more into failure? The motel room question lingered. Could I build something to outshine the silence of my family's absence? That card was my answer, a chance to turn my elder care program into something permanent, something undeniable. I spent the next week sketching a business plan for ElderGuard, a nonprofit to bring free health screenings to seniors across Texas. My apartment became a war room. Papers strewn across the coffee table, laptop glowing late into the night, empty coffee mugs piling up. By December, I had a pitch, data from our hospital pilot, a budget, and a vision for mobile clinics in underserved areas. Dr. Lee met me at a diner, his eyes scanning my proposal over greasy hash browns. "This could change lives," he said, sliding over a contract for a $50,000 seed grant. "Don't let me down." I shook his hand, my heart racing, feeling like Ruth was cheering from somewhere beyond. Starting ElderGuard was like building a house in a hurricane. I took unpaid leave from the hospital, pouring every ounce of energy into the launch. My days stretched to 80-hour weeks, writing grant applications, scouting vans for mobile clinics, begging suppliers for discounted equipment. My bank account dwindled, savings drained to cover rent and gas, my fridge stocked with cheap ramen. Mia, my mentee nurse, signed on part-time, her enthusiasm a bright spot. "This is nuts, Jordan," she'd laugh, hauling boxes of blood pressure cuffs. "But it's the good kind of nuts." Still, the grind wore me down. One night, a supplier backed out, leaving us short on exam kits. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by spreadsheets, the numbers mocking me. Dad's voice crept in, "You're wasting your potential." I stared at a job listing for a corporate nursing gig, steady pay, benefits, no more scraping by. It felt like a betrayal of Ruth, but the temptation was real, a whisper of the security my family always preached. I hovered over the apply button, my thumb trembling until my phone pinged with a voicemail from Mrs. Alvarez, a patient from our hospital program. "Jordan, you saved my life with those checkups," she said, voice thick with gratitude. "Don't know what we'd do without you." I closed the laptop, tears burning. Ruth's compass steadying me. I couldn't quit, not when people believed in me. Money was the biggest hurdle. The grant covered basics, but scaling meant more staff, more vans, more everything. Mia and I hit roadblocks daily, venues canceling, volunteers flaking. One week, a rural clinic pulled funding, citing budget cuts, leaving us $5,000 short for a new van. I paced my apartment, crunching numbers, Dad's words looping, failing at the basics. Mia caught me stressing and dragged me to a taco truck for a break. "You're not your dad's voice, Jordan," she said, shoving a taco my way. "This is bigger than him." Her words sparked an idea. I cold called a Dallas-based insurer, pitching ElderGuard as a cost saver. Preventive care cuts ER claims, I argued, channeling my hospital data. They bit, agreeing to a pilot partnership that covered our shortfall and funded 2 more clinics. The deal closed in a cramped conference room, their rep shaking my hand as I signed, my heart pounding with disbelief. We were in the black, barely, but moving forward. The breakthrough came with a cost. I barely slept, living on adrenaline and coffee, my social life non-existent. Mia became my rock, her own family drama mirroring mine. She'd vent about her dad's pressure while we unpacked supplies, and I'd share just enough to keep her fighting. But late at night, alone, the silence roared. No family texts, no holiday invites, just the hum of my fridge and Ruth's book on my nightstand. I'd trace its pages, her voice a faint echo, pushing me to keep going. ElderGuard was growing, 3 clinics, dozens of seniors served, but the loneliness was a shadow I couldn't shake. As I locked up the van one night, a new email from Dr. Lee popped up. "Ready to talk expansion?" My pulse quickened. Was this the moment I'd outrun my doubts? Or would the weight of going it alone finally break me? Dr. Lee's email about expansion glowed on my laptop screen, a beacon in the quiet of my San Antonio apartment. It was early 2016, and I was 25, with ElderGuard teetering on the edge of something big. The question from that night, would the weight of going it alone break me, still lingered, but the insurer's deal had given us wings. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were growing, and I was determined to make it undeniable, even if my family couldn't see it. Ruth's book sat on my nightstand, her voice a steady hum. "Chase what sets your soul on fire." I leaned into that fire, ready to turn ElderGuard into a force that could outshine the silence of my cutoff. Growth came fast but messy. By spring, we'd hired 2 more staff. Lena, a nurse practitioner with a knack for calming nervous seniors, and Ryan, an admin whiz who kept our schedules from imploding. We expanded to 5 clinics across San Antonio and Houston, our vans rolling into neighborhoods where ER visits were a way of life. Our data showed a 50% drop in hospital admissions for our patients, and a national health magazine ran a feature on us, calling ElderGuard a game changer for preventive care. I'd read the article in my cramped office, a converted closet at the hospital, grinning like a kid who'd aced a test. But the pace was brutal. I was clocking 90-hour weeks, juggling grant reports, staff training, and patient follow-ups. My apartment was a revolving door of takeout boxes and unopened mail, my social life reduced to quick texts with Mia, who was now full-time with us, her energy keeping me sane. "We're building something epic," she'd say, hauling supplies with a grin, even as her own family's pressure weighed her down. Mia's struggles mirrored mine, a subplot that kept us tethered. One evening, unloading a van, she confessed her dad had offered to pay for pharmacy school if she quit ElderGuard. "He says I'm throwing away my future," she said, her voice cracking as we stacked blood pressure cuffs. I paused, the memory of Dad's failure jab cutting through. "You're not," I told her, handing her a coffee. "You're saving people like Mrs. Alvarez, who'd be lost without us. That's your future." I shared a sliver of my own story, enough to show her she wasn't alone, urging her to stick with what made her heart race. Helping her fight her doubts felt like honoring Ruth, but it also stirred my own. Was I enough without my family's nod? A new threat emerged in the form of Sarah Klein, a polished director of a rival nonprofit, Health First, focused on senior care with deeper pockets. She cornered me at a networking event, her smile sharp as she handed me her card. "Impressive work, Jordan, but small operations burn out fast," she said, eyeing my worn sneakers. "Join us, or you'll get left behind." Her words echoed Dad's, stirring old insecurities. Health First was snagging grants we needed, and rumors spread they were poaching our volunteers. I pushed back, pitching harder to funders, but the pressure mounted, each rejection letter a test of my resolve. To scale Elder Guard, I started a center fund in my bank account, squirreling away 30% of my paycheck plus speaking fees from conferences. My dream was a permanent hub, a real facility, not just vans, for exams, classes, and community support. By late 2016, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a 10,000-square-foot warehouse in Fort Worth. The place was a fixer-upper, with cracked concrete and dusty beams, but I saw exam rooms, a gym for physical therapy, a kitchen for nutrition demos. Every dollar saved felt like a middle finger to Dad's doubts, but the grind left me hollow. Holidays hit hard, no family dinners, just a frozen pizza and Ruth's book for company. A cousin's email slipped through, updating me on the family. Austin's new townhouse, Mom's latest gala, Dad's promotion. "They miss you," she wrote, but I didn't reply, the words feeling like a trap. The warehouse deal closed in early 2017, keys jingling in my hand as I stood in the empty space, heart pounding with possibility. Mia and Lena were there, popping a cheap bottle of sparkling cider, laughing as we toasted to Elder Guard's empire. The moment felt like a triumph, but as I locked up that night, a question loomed. Would this center be enough to prove I'd chosen right? Or was I still running from a shadow I couldn't escape? The keys to the Elder Guard Community Health Center jangled in my hand as I locked the warehouse door, the Fort Worth skyline glinting under a pink dusk in early 2017. At 25, I stood in the empty lot. The weight of that question, was I still running from a shadow, mixing with the thrill of what we'd built? The center was real now, a 10,000-square-foot promise to Ruth, to Mrs. Alvarez, to every senior we'd served. But as I drove home, the silence of my family's absence hung heavy, no one to share the victory with except Mia and Lena, who'd already headed home after our cider toast. I pushed the doubt down, focusing on tomorrow's work, turning a dusty warehouse into a lifeline. The next morning, I was unloading exam tables with Mia when a sleek black Escalade pulled into the lot, tires crunching gravel. My stomach dropped. Austin's car. He stepped out, Brooks Brothers suit crisp, Brooke beside him in a tailored blazer, both looking out of place against the warehouse's chipped paint. "Jordan?" Austin called, squinting at the Elder Guard sign. "This is yours?" I wiped sweat from my brow, nodding, caught off guard. Yeah, all 10,000 feet of it. Brooke's eyes widened, impressed. He saw your name in a health article, she said, and we were driving back from my parents' place in Dallas. Austin's gaze lingered on the building, something unreadable in his expression. Can we see it? I hesitated, the memory of his silence at the engagement party stinging, but waved them in. Sure, come on. Inside, the space was a work in progress, exposed beams, stacks of supplies, a whiteboard with renovation plans, but it buzzed with potential. I walked them through, pointing out where exam rooms would go, the gym for physical therapy, the kitchen for nutrition classes. Mia joined us, explaining our fall prevention program to Brooke, who asked sharp questions about funding. Austin trailed behind, quiet, taking it all in. At the future reception area, he finally spoke, voice low. Jordan, this is unreal. You built a damn empire. I laughed, half skeptical, waiting for the catch. Not exactly Goldman Sachs. His face tightened, and he glanced at Brooke, who nodded subtly. Can we talk? Alone? Mia and Brooke stepped outside, leaving us by a stack of unopened boxes. The air shifted, heavy. Austin leaned against a wall, loosening his tie. I owe you an apology, he started, eyes on the floor. That night at my engagement party, I should have stepped in. Dad was out of line and I just froze. My chest tightened, old hurt flaring. You let them call me a failure, Austin. You didn't say a word. He winced, nodding. I know. I was caught up in their world. Still am, I guess. But it's hollow. The reversal hit me hard. He was always the golden boy, untouchable. What do you mean? I pressed. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. My job's all numbers, deals, stress. I'm good at it, but it's not me. Seeing this? He gestured at the center. You're doing something real. I'm jealous, Jordan. His admission stunned me, cracking the wall I'd built, but anger lingered. You could have called, I snapped. 2 years and nothing. His voice rose, defensive. I was ashamed, okay? Taking their money, staying quiet. It felt wrong, but I didn't know how to fix it. The argument flared, sharp and raw, years of unspoken tension spilling out. You picked their side, I said, voice shaking. I was alone. He stepped closer, eyes earnest. I'm here now. This place, it's proof they were wrong about you. My throat burned, torn between hurt and his sincerity. I wanted to believe him, but trust felt fragile, like a cracked window. Before I could respond, he pulled out his phone, dialing Dad on speaker. Austin, what? I started, but he held up a hand. Dad, you need to see Jordan's center, he said, voice firm. She's built something incredible, and you were dead wrong about her. Dad's voice crackled, surprised. She's there? I shook my head, heart racing, not ready to face him. Tell her we're talking, Dad said, hesitant. Austin hung up, looking at me. They'll come around. Give it time. I stood there, staring at the phone, Ruth's voice faint in my mind. Austin's regret, his call to Dad, it was a door cracking open, but I wasn't sure I could walk through it. As he and Brooke drove off, waving, I turned back to the center, its skeleton of beams waiting to come alive. Could I let them back in after all this time? Or was this place, my proof, enough? Austin's Escalade disappeared down the Fort Worth street, leaving me in the shadow of the Elder Guard Community Health Center, its half-finished walls looming under the dusk. His words, "They'll come around," hung in the air, stirring a mix of hope and dread. At 25, I'd built something real, something Ruth would have cheered for, but the idea of facing Mom and Dad again twisted my gut. That night at Austin's engagement party 2 years ago, their voices labeling me a failure still burned. Could I open that door after slamming it shut? I turned back to the center, its skeleton of beams a testament to my defiance, and locked up, unsure if I was ready for their judgment or their regret. A week later, I was directing volunteers in the center's new exam room, the smell of fresh paint cutting through the dust, when Mia nudged me. "Jordan, you've got visitors." My heart skipped as I stepped outside to see Mom and Dad's silver Lexus parked in the lot, gleaming against the gravel. Mom, in a crisp blouse, looked older, lines deeper around her eyes. Dad stood stiff in a polo, his usual confidence muted. "Jordan," Mom said, her voice tentative, "Austin told us we had to see this." I swallowed hard, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Okay, come in." The tour was surreal, like showing strangers your soul. I walked them through the center, exam rooms with new equipment, a gym space marked for physical therapy, a kitchen for nutrition demos. Volunteers bustled around, setting up chairs for a senior exercise class. Mom's eyes lingered on a whiteboard listing our programs, her fingers brushing a flyer about fall prevention. "You did all this?" she asked, almost to herself. Dad nodded at the data I showed. 50% fewer ER visits, but his silence felt heavy, like he was sizing it up against Austin's deals. Mia chimed in, explaining our outreach to rural areas, her pride infectious. I caught Mom smiling faintly, but Dad's jaw stayed tight, and I braced for the inevitable critique. We ended at a folding table in what would be the staff room, coffee cups scattered among blueprints. I steeled myself, Ruth's voice a faint anchor. "Your heart's your compass." "So what do you think?" I asked, voice steady but heart pounding. Dad leaned back, arms crossed, his default defense mode. "It's impressive, Jordan, but it's a risky play. Nonprofits bleed money." The old sting flared, same old Dad, measuring worth in dollars. "It's not about profit," I shot back, sharper than intended. "We're saving lives, cutting costs for insurers, keeping seniors at home." Mom touched my arm, her voice soft. "We're proud, honey, but we worried. Your life looked so hard." Dad cut in. "We pushed Austin because he showed results. We didn't see this coming." The words sparked a fight in my head. Forgive them or hold the line. I wanted to scream, to list every dismissal since I was a kid, but their faces, softer now, held me back. "You called me a failure," I said, voice low, trembling. 2 years ago you said I was throwing my life away." Mom's eyes welled up. "We were wrong," she whispered. Dad shifted, uncomfortable, then nodded. "We were. Seeing this, you've built something we didn't understand." His admission was a crack in his armor, but he doubled down, voice gruff. We thought you'd crash and burn. Didn't want that, the red herring of their worry. Protection, not rejection. Felt like a half-truth, but it softened the edges of my anger. I wrestled with it, Ruth's memory urging me to hear them out, even as the hurt screamed to push them away. Mom pulled an envelope from her purse, sliding it across the table. "We want to help," she said. $250,000, like we gave Austin, for the center. My breath caught, the sum a mirror of that night's wound. I stared at it, torn. Taking it felt like forgiving too soon, but rejecting it meant clinging to pain. Ruth's voice cut through. "What lasts is the good you do." I pushed the envelope back, heart racing. "I don't need it for me," I said, "but use it for a scholarship fund, in Grandma Ruth's name, for nursing students who fight the same battles I did." Dad blinked, surprised, then nodded slowly. "That's a good call." Mom's tears spilled, and she hugged me, her perfume familiar yet distant. "We're learning, Jordan," she said. Dad offered a rare, awkward pat on my shoulder. Ruth would have loved this. As they left, promising to set up the fund, I stood in the empty staff room, the envelope gone, but its weight lingering. They'd admitted their mistake, but trust was a bridge half built. The scholarship idea felt like a spark, a way to honor Ruth and keep pushing. But as I locked up, a new question flickered. Could this gesture really mend what was broken, or was it just a start? 6 months after my parents' visit, the Elder Guard Community Health Center hummed with life. It was late summer 2017, and at 26, I stood in the Fort Worth lobby, watching seniors shuffle in for yoga classes and nurses prepping exam rooms. The once dusty warehouse now gleamed, fresh paint, bright posters, a kitchen dishing out healthy snacks. The Ruth Hayes Scholarship Fund was live, funding 3 nursing students already, their thank you letters pinned to my office corkboard. That day in the half-built staff room, when I'd pushed back their $250,000 for a legacy instead, had cracked open a door to my family I wasn't sure I'd walk through. The question lingered, was this a real mending or just a start? But the center's pulse, the lives it touched, kept me grounded. Ruth's compass was steady, pointing me forward. Family ties were thawing, but it wasn't a Hallmark movie. Mom called weekly now, asking about the center, her voice warmer, though still tinged with caution. Dad sent stiff emails, updates on the scholarship fund, each one signed "Proud of You." I'd read them at my desk, Ruth's book nearby, wrestling with the instinct to keep my walls up. Austin was the surprise. He'd shown up a month after his visit, asking to join Elder Guard's advisory board. "I'm burned out on finance," he confessed over coffee, his tie swapped for a casual button-down. "Your work, it's got purpose. I want in." The reversal floored me. The golden boy wanted to trade his corner office for my world. I hesitated, memories of his silence at the engagement party stinging, but his eyes held a hunger for meaning I couldn't ignore. "Okay," I said, "but you're learning grant writing first." He laughed, rolling up his sleeves, and soon he was at board meetings, crunching numbers for our expansion to Austin. The final test came at a family dinner in Plano, the first since the cutoff. Mom insisted on hosting to celebrate the scholarship fund's launch. The dining room smelled of her signature pot roast, the table set with her best china, but tension hung like humidity. Austin and Brooke arrived early, helping set out wine glasses, their ease a contrast to my nerves. Dad greeted me with a hug, awkward but real, while Mom fussed over my hair, whispering, "You look tired, honey." We sat, the clink of forks loud in the quiet. Then Dad raised a glass, voice gruff but steady. "To the Ruth Hayes Scholarship Fund, and to Jordan for showing us what matters." My throat tightened, the words landing heavier than I expected. Austin chimed in, grinning. "And to Elder Guard for kicking my butt into gear." Laughter broke the ice, but as Mom shared plans for the fund's gala, Dad slipped in. "Maybe now you'll consider a bigger role, Jordan. Management, less grunt work." The old jab, softer but familiar, hit like a speed bump. I set my glass down, heart racing. "I'm where I'm supposed to be," I said, firm but calm. "The grunt work changes lives." Austin nodded, backing me up. "She's right, Dad. It's not just numbers, it's people." Dad blinked, caught off guard, but Mom squeezed his hand, and he let it go, a small victory in a long war. Later, as we cleared plates, Austin pulled me aside. "I'm quitting my job," he said, voice low. "Elder Guard's my focus now. You showed me there's more than their script." His choice, walking away from the life they'd groomed him for, felt like a mirror to my own rebellion, sealing our bond. I hugged him, the rift from 2 years ago fading, not gone, but softer. Back in Fort Worth, I stood in the center's lobby, watching a senior thank Mia for a checkup, her smile echoing Mrs. Alvarez's years ago. Ruth's book sat in my office, its pages worn but alive. I'd spent years chasing a path that felt true, fighting doubts in my family's shadow. The center, the fund, Austin's change, they were proof I'd chosen right. Living authentically wasn't easy, but it was enough. I thought of Ruth, her voice clear. "What lasts is the good you do." That was my legacy, built not for applause but for impact. If this moved you, like, comment, and share, then subscribe and watch the next story on our channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.